for two separate investigations. The first of which is the death of E.J. Bradford, and the other is the shooting of a 12-year-old girl. Our decision going forward is based on the prosecution standards that exist nationally in determining whether or not a conflict exists for a prosecutor in handling a case going forward. And let me make one thing perfectly clear. That we understand the gravity of the situation that we are now exercising jurisdiction of. For the people of Hoover and for those in Jefferson County, we understand not only a desire for this to be handled as quickly as possible, but also that the investigation be thorough and it be complete and be handled by a team of prosecutors who are experienced in this area. And I can tell you up front that we have put together a team that not only is experienced, but has handled cases of this nature and will handle this professionally going forward. So how did we get to this point? Obviously, I have been having discussions with individuals in Jefferson County along with Aaliyah since this happened to know a little bit about the circumstances that took place that day in the mall, the circumstances of where we are in the investigation, and understanding that Hoover has allowed Aaliyah to be the lead agency in this particular case. I've also met and had multiple discussions with Danny Carr, who is a friend and somebody that is a career prosecutor like myself. And in those discussions, I talked with Danny about whether or not there was the potential for a conflict for him in determining whether or not our office would be involved. He specifically has told me that he would like to be able to continue this case and did not ask to be recused, but also understood why it was important for an independent agency to evaluate, based on national standards, whether it was important for our office to exercise jurisdiction. And in my request, Danny provided us with a letter to discuss specifically those areas of interest for us in that analysis. And he told us several things. One of which, for the officer that is being investigated involved in the death of Mr. Bradford, that officer is a material witness in over 20 cases currently pending in Jefferson County. That's 20 separate victims who are depending upon a material witness that potentially could be adverse to the district attorney's office in Jefferson County as a result of this investigation. 20 victims who deserve justice, just like other victims in other cases. Mr. Carr also acknowledged in his letter that he had relationships with several of those who are currently protesting in Jefferson County and in Hoover. We've seen the pictures. We're aware of what is out there publicly available. Also know that there are those who are part of the protest that specifically said that they were involved in developing petitions for Danny Carr to be appointed district attorney when the governor appointed Mike Anderson, and that those involved in protest also claimed to be involved specifically with the campaign in which Mr. Carr was recently elected. But most importantly, within the letter that we received from Mr. Carr was this statement, and I'll read it verbatim. I also recognize that based upon the information provided, a fair-minded, objective observer could conclude that a conflict exists. So what was our analysis? I told you the facts, but there are two standards that were really applicable. The first of which is for the Alabama State Bar, the rules of professional conduct, and whether or not there was an actual conflict for Mr. Carr going forward. There is no actual conflict that complies with the rules of professional responsibility in Alabama. But there is a broader standard, and one that clearly directly related to the letter in which Mr. Carr gave us, that is supplied by the standards of the National District Attorneys Association, a national organization in which I served previously on their board of directors that provides guidance to prosecutors throughout the country on a variety of matters, including those in which they should recuse. Specifically, those standards state in Rule 1.3.3 subparen D, and I'm going to read this at length. The prosecutor should excuse himself or herself from any investigation, prosecution, or other matter where personal interest of the prosecutor would cause a fair-minded, objective observer to conclude that the prosecutor's neutrality, judgment, or ability to administer the law in an objective manner may be compromised. We all recognize the decisions made in this case will be scrutinized at significant levels. What is important is that that decision not be criticized because of some perceived conflict. And we determined that in the interest of fairness and justice for all involved, that our office would exercise jurisdiction and to take care of these matters going forward. So what have we done? Number one, as I told you before, we have assembled a remarkable team, one of which will deal directly with the investigation involving the death of Mr. Bradford. The other team will be involved in the pending case involving Mr. Brown and the related investigation involving the 12-year-old girl. We have talked with multiple jurisdictions outside of Alabama that have dealt with similar matters, to talk to them about best practices, to discuss with them lessons learned, and get advice and counsel from them about how we should act going forward. Also, we have consulted national standards, most specifically ones adopted by the National Association of Prosecution Attorneys, to talk about use of force investigations and how prosecutors play a role in the course of those investigations. One of the things I think is paramount within the protocol is the 4 standards that will be adopted by us going forward, the principles that will apply into the work that we're done. These 4. Number 1, we'll have respect for human dignity. Number 2, we advocate for independent investigation and prosecution decision-making. That we'll have responsible transparency, and that there will be procedural fairness and justice. I believe strongly in the team that we have assembled that they will seek justice in this case, relating to every matter that is before us, and that will be the guiding force. I've had multiple conversations with Secretary Taylor. I know that Aaliyah has expended significant assets and resources in this investigation, and they're not finished. And they're working as quickly and thoroughly as they can. It is our intention to start right away to make sure that we are providing them with the advice and counsel that they need, and that we're prepared to evaluate the materials that they provide us. At this point in time, I'll be glad to answer any questions. Yes, sir.
Attorney General, one of the main focuses of these protests has been the demand to see any video or body camera video that may have shown what happened. When Aaliyah wraps up their investigation, will you make that video public?
One of the things we'll do is talk with Aaliyah about where we stand currently, because obviously we have not sat down with them to determine what video exists or the quality of the video that exists. But what we'll do is attempt to be as responsibly transparent as we can. Remember, this is 3 cases, not just 1. And so we also have to be mindful that we cannot compromise what goes on in another case by the release of information in this case. What I do understand is Aaliyah has provided the opportunity for the family to see the video through their attorney. And I think that was a good faith gesture of being transparent. And we'll continue to talk with them going forward. But also recognize this. A video doesn't tell the whole story. There are countless witnesses that have been interviewed. There's multiple areas of evidence that will be collected. And all of that will be a part of our decision making in all of these cases, including the one involving Mr. Bradford.
When did you receive this letter from Mr. Carr?
I believe it was on Tuesday.
You mentioned that this is 3 cases, but is there any precedent for the AG's office overtaking a use of force case such as Mr. Bradford's shooting?
Our office has been involved in multiple officer-involved shooting cases over the years.
What do you have to say to the public who become very heated about seeing this body camera? Do you think they deserve to see this video?
Well, I think this is a pending criminal case. And typically, if you look at most cases, evidence isn't directly released to the public. And again, we'll be mindful to say that this video itself, and I've not seen it, doesn't mean that it tells the whole story of what happened. And it would be irresponsible to release partial evidence without the public having the opportunity to know clearly what happened. And it is our intention, regardless of what we do here, is to be as transparent as possible, but also do it within the bounds of what is appropriate for prosecutors.
Have you had any interaction with the family of any of the victims? I know you just took over this case. They had expressed their confidence in the district attorney being able to handle this case. Does that pose any challenges for you now as you begin to take over this investigation?
We made outreach to Aaliyah this morning to notify them of this decision before we made this announcement today. And we'll have victim service providers working directly with those families, and we plan to be able to meet with them in the coming weeks as we go forward. Obviously, our priority right now is to learn as much as we can about the investigation and what our role will be. Thank you very much for your time.
Did you have a question also?
I was wondering if we, on a separate subject,
Sure.
you had made